The border district was a forgotten place. The land stretched dry and silent, where dust floated in the air like an old memory. Houses stood close together, but the people who lived inside rarely trusted strangers. Life here was simple but also suspicious. Every new face was studied, every movement noted. It was a place where secrets could not hide for long. One evening, as the sun began to sink behind the low hills, a woman arrived at the edge of the town. She carried nothing but a small cloth bag and walked with slow steps as if she had traveled very far. Her clothes were plain, but her presence was unusual. Her skin seemed too smooth, her eyes too bright, silver like cold metal. Some people thought she might just be tired from the road. Others whispered, "She does not look like us." She asked for work in the only way she could. Her voice was soft, broken, and uncertain. "I cook," she said, pointing to the kitchens of the small inns and homes. The people stared. A stranger alone in a border town where outsiders were never welcome. This was not common. But hunger and work were things even a suspicious town understood. The innkeeper's wife gave her a chance. "Cook for us," she said, "and if the food is good, you can stay." That night, the smell from the kitchen spread through the dusty street. It was not the smell of ordinary bread or stew. It was different, warm, rich, and sharp at the same time. The villagers who passed by felt something pull at their memories. Some said it reminded them of their childhood. Others thought of faraway markets they had once visited. But one man noticed more than anyone else. He lived next door. A stern man, tall and broad, with eyes as sharp as knives. His name was known by all, though most kept away from him. He was a veteran, a soldier once feared and respected. People called him the Colonel, though he had left the uniform long ago. He had built walls around his heart, just as strong as the wooden fences around his home. When the smell of her cooking reached him, he paused. His mind went back to places no one else here had seen. Battlefields far from Earth, alien lands where the air itself carried strange scents. He froze, his jaw tightening. That food was not from Earth. He knew it immediately. The next day, he saw her clearly for the first time. She was tall, taller than most women, and her movements were graceful but strange. She seemed to watch everything carefully, as though learning from each gesture and word. When she chopped vegetables, her hands moved too fast, too precise, almost like a machine. When she touched fire, it bent toward her as if obeying. The Colonel narrowed his eyes. He had seen many things in his years of war, things ordinary villagers would never believe. He had fought beside humans, and he had fought against others. He knew the look of someone hiding a past. This woman was not simply a poor traveler searching for work. She was something more. At night, when the village slept, he saw her step outside her small room. She lifted her head to the stars, whispering words that made no sense. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. It was almost as if the sky itself listened. Alien. The word formed silently in the Colonel's mind. He clenched his fist. He had fought aliens before. He had buried friends because of them. And now, one stood next door, pretending to cook. Yet something in her manner was different. She was not armed. She was not violent. She cooked meals and smiled politely, though her smile never reached her eyes. Children wandered close to her, curious about her silver gaze, and she never turned them away. If anything, she seemed lonely, as if carrying a sorrow too heavy to share. Still, the Colonel did not trust easily. Trust for him was a weapon that could kill the unprepared. So he watched. Day after day, he studied her, noting every unusual move. And each day, the suspense grew stronger. Who was she really? Why had she come to this forgotten district so far from the cities? And why did she cook meals with flavors that reminded him of wars fought beyond the stars? The people of the border district only saw a quiet, strange woman trying to survive. But the Colonel saw the truth waiting beneath her silence. He knew sooner or later her secret would come out. And when it did, it could bring danger to them all. The woman, however, continued her work as if nothing troubled her. She stirred pots, baked bread, and smiled when thanked. But every night she returned to the same spot under the open sky, her silver eyes reflecting the stars like mirrors. Something was coming. The Colonel could feel it. The air around her seemed too heavy with secrets, too sharp with mystery. This was no simple arrival of a stranger. This was the beginning of something larger, something that would test his loyalty, his strength, and perhaps his humanity itself. The border district had always been silent, but with her arrival, silence was broken. And the Colonel, The stern man next door knew his life would never be the same again. The next morning, the border district returned to its usual silence. People went about their daily work, fixing carts, feeding animals, trading in the small market. But one man noticed every detail from his window. The stern man next door. The colonel. He lived alone in a house made of stone, built strong and tall like a fortress. His door was always locked, his garden bare, and his voice rarely heard except when giving warnings to wandering children. People respected him, but no one truly liked him. He was too hard, too cold. Now his sharp eyes were fixed on the newcomer, the strange woman who had arrived last night. He did not speak to her. He did not greet her, but he studied her carefully, just as he once studied enemies on the battlefield. Every movement, every word, every breath mattered to him. From his window he saw how she worked in the inn's kitchen. She cleaned with quiet speed, as though she had done it 1,000 times before. She cooked with hands too precise for a human. And the food she prepared, simple bread, broth, roasted meat, tasted different. People licked their lips after eating. They came back the next day asking for more. The colonel frowned. Good food could not hide what he already suspected. Her silver eyes, her strange stillness, her whispers to the night sky. She was not human, but the villagers were blind. They only cared that their stomachs were full. She is skilled, they said. She is polite. They did not see the danger. The colonel, however, remembered. He remembered wars beyond Earth, when alien soldiers burned entire colonies. He remembered comrades falling one by one under strange weapons. And now one of them stood here acting like a cook. That evening he stepped outside leaning against his wooden fence. She was carrying a basket of herbs. Their eyes met for the first time. She froze. For a second her silver gaze did not blink. Then she lowered her head politely as if to hide her fear. "You cook well," the colonel said, his voice heavy, deep, almost like a growl. "Thank you," she replied softly. Her accent was broken, her words slow like someone still learning. "You're not from here," he said. "No," she admitted. Silence stretched between them. She shifted the basket in her arms, but he did not move. His eyes stayed on her sharp as steel. "Why here?" he finally asked. "Why this border?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her lips pressed tight. For a moment she seemed unsure whether to answer. Finally she whispered, "Work. Only work." The colonel's jaw tightened. He could hear lies in a soldier's voice, even small ones, and this was not the full truth. Later that night he watched again from his window. She walked out into the dusty street, looked at the stars and spoke in her strange tongue. Her voice was soft but carried a rhythm, like a prayer or a code. The faint glow in her eyes returned. The colonel clenched his fists. This was proof enough she was connected to something out there, something not of this world. The next morning whispers spread in the town. Children who had played near the kitchen swore they saw her light a fire without flint. Old women muttered that her cooking healed their stomach pains faster than any herb. The innkeeper's wife smiled wide, saying, "She is a blessing." But to the colonel, blessings did not come from silver-eyed strangers. Blessings could turn into threats overnight. That evening, when she walked past his fence again, he spoke once more. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I have seen eyes like yours before." Her step faltered. She looked at him quickly, alarm flashing across her face. "Where?" she asked quietly. "On battlefields," he said. "Far from here. Places no villager would believe." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she lowered her head again and walked faster into her small room. The colonel stood in the dark, his mind racing. She knew who he was now. She knew he had recognized her. And that meant the quiet balance between them would not last much longer. He poured himself a glass of bitter drink and sat by his window, watching the road. He had lived through too many wars to trust chance. This woman had not come here by accident. She carried secrets. And secrets, he knew, had a way of exploding when left too long in silence. The district might ignore it. The villagers might even welcome her cooking. But the colonel could not. His instinct screamed that something larger was hiding beneath her soft words and gentle hands. And deep inside, he knew. If her secret came out, the border district would never remain the same. Days passed, and the woman's presence became part of the district's rhythm. People who once whispered now lined up outside the inn just to taste her meals. Even those who distrusted strangers found themselves unable to resist. Her cooking was not only food, it was an experience. A poor farmer who ate her stew said it gave him the strength to work twice as long in the fields. A sick child drank her broth and fell asleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. The old men at the market argued less when they ate her bread, their tempers strangely calm. The villagers called it luck. They said, "She has a gift. God must have touched her hands." But the colonel knew better. Luck did not explain flavors that stirred memories from battles fought light years away. Luck did not explain the quiet power that seemed to flow from her food into the people who ate it. One evening, while the inn was crowded, the colonel decided to test her. He walked in and sat at a corner table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He had avoided eating her food until now, refusing to let himself be fooled by flavor. But this night he ordered a meal. When the plate arrived, steam rising into the dim light, the colonel felt his throat tighten. It was a dish he recognized, though impossible to explain why. Years ago, on a distant moon, after a brutal battle, an alien ally had shared a meal with him. The taste had been unforgettable, a strange mix of fire and sweetness that cut through exhaustion and gave him hope. And now, that same taste sat before him in a border inn, cooked by this silver-eyed woman. He lifted the spoon slowly, as if it might burn his hand. The moment the food touched his tongue, the memories returned. Blood, war, fire, stars, and the face of the alien soldier who had once saved his life. His eyes narrowed. He set the spoon down with a sharp sound. The woman looked at him from the kitchen doorway, her gaze steady, as if she knew what he had just remembered. After the meal, he approached her. The inn fell silent, villagers watching the exchange. "Where did you learn this?" the colonel demanded, his voice low but heavy with meaning. Her lips trembled. For a moment she did not answer. Then softly she said, "From home." The word home hung in the air like a stone dropped in still water. To the villagers it meant nothing. To the colonel it meant everything. Her home was not here. Not earth. Not this soil or sky. That night he did not sleep. He sat by his window, staring at her small room, his mind a storm. She was no ordinary refugee. She was carrying knowledge, recipes, and perhaps even power from another world. The next day he tested her again. He asked for a dish with rare herbs, ones she should not even know by name. She did not hesitate. Her hands moved with certainty, her eyes focused. Within an hour she placed the dish before him, exact and perfect. "How?" he asked. She did not reply. She only looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting his own suspicion. It was then the colonel noticed something strange. Her hands, while steady, bore faint scars, not like cuts from knives, but burns from energy, the kind made by weapons not of earth. She had been in battles too. She was no ordinary cook. She was someone who had lived through war just as he had. That night, once again, he saw her outside under the stars. But this time something changed. As she whispered, the air itself seemed to hum. A soft glow surrounded her, faint but real, bending the shadows around her body. The colonel's breath caught in his throat. He had seen battlefield healers use such power before, but never here, never this close. His heart pounded. Should he confront her? Should he report her to the guards, or should he wait and see what secret she was hiding? The next morning, the village children ran to the inn shouting, "The woman healed my brother. He had fever and now it is gone." The villagers called it a miracle. They smiled and praised her, grateful for the blessing. But the colonel stood apart, watching, silent. To him, miracles were only masks for truths too dangerous to speak. And now he knew. This woman's hidden talent was not just cooking. It was something greater, something that could save or destroy. The question was no longer who she was. The question was what she planned to do. And the colonel, standing in the shadows with eyes like steel, vowed to find out before it was too late. The border district slept early. Doors closed, lamps dimmed, and silence wrapped the streets like a blanket. But one man never truly slept, the colonel. His sharp instincts from years of war kept him alert even when the village lay quiet. That night he noticed movement outside his window again. The woman. She left her small room and walked toward the open fields beyond the last houses. She carried nothing, not even a lamp. The moonlight alone guided her steps. The colonel followed. Quiet, steady like a hunter. His boots pressed softly against the dry earth, his shadow stretching long behind him. She reached a hill just outside the district, where the land rose enough to see the horizon clearly. There she stopped, lifting her face to the night sky. The colonel hid behind a broken wall, watching. At first she stood in silence, but then her lips began to move. She whispered in a language he did not know, smooth, flowing, like water running over stone. The words rose and fell in rhythm, almost like a song. And then it happened. Her silver eyes began to glow faintly, reflecting the stars above. The air around her shifted. A soft hum filled the silence as though the ground itself listened to her voice. Tiny sparks, no brighter than fireflies, flickered around her hands before vanishing into the night. The colonel's chest tightened. He had seen such things before. Alien rituals, communication signals, secret codes sent across space. It was never harmless. It always meant danger. But there was something different here. Her face was not cold or cruel. Instead, sorrow filled her expression, as if she was mourning something lost. The whispers sounded less like commands and more like prayers. The colonel narrowed his eyes. Was she calling for help? Or was she calling for war? The next morning, the woman returned to her routine as if nothing had happened. She baked bread, washed pots, and greeted customers. Her hands moved with calm precision, her voice soft and polite. To the villagers, she was simply a hard-working stranger. But the colonel could not forget what he had seen. The hum in the air, the sparks around her hands, the grief on her face. That evening, he confronted her. "You walk in the fields at night," he said, standing by his fence as she passed. Her steps slowed. "I watch stars," she answered simply. "Watch?" His tone was sharp. "Or speak to them." Her silver eyes flickered just for a moment. She looked down quickly. "Both," she whispered. The colonel's jaw clenched. "Both." She had admitted it without even realizing. "You're sending signals," he said, voice low. "Who are you calling?" Her face turned pale. She shook her head. "No, not call, only remember." The colonel studied her carefully. Her voice trembled, but not with lies, more with pain. He recognized the look. It was the same look soldiers carried when they thought of fallen comrades. That night, once again, she walked to the hill. This time, the colonel did not hide. He stepped out of the shadows and approached her. Her body stiffened when she saw him. The glow in her eyes dimmed instantly and the whispers stopped. "You can't keep secrets here," he said. "Not from me." For a long moment, she did not answer. Then she lowered her head and spoke softly. "I speak to the sky because it is the only place that listens. My people, gone. My world, gone. Only stars remember." The colonel's breath caught. Was it true? Could she really be a survivor, not a spy? But before he could question further, a sharp light cut through the sky. A patrol drone from the border guards, its red beam scanning the ground. The woman panicked, stepping back into the shadows. The colonel grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the broken wall. They crouched low as the drone passed overhead, humming like an angry wasp. When it was gone, she whispered, "They look for me?" "Yes," the colonel said firmly. "And if they find you, you won't live to cook another meal." She looked at him then, her silver eyes filled with fear and trust at the same time. For the first time, she was not just a stranger. She was vulnerable, exposed. The colonel let go of her arm, but his voice stayed hard. "If you want to survive, you tell me everything. No more secrets under the sky." She swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. The colonel turned his eyes to the stars above, cold and endless. Something about this woman's sorrow touched him in ways he did not want to admit. But his instincts warned him still. Secrets like hers could bring death to everyone in the district. And now, he was caught in the middle. The border district rarely saw visitors, and when they did, it usually meant trouble. That week, trouble came in the form of armored patrol trucks. Dust clouds rose on the horizon as soldiers rolled into the village, their red insignias sharp against the dull earth. The villagers gathered nervously in the square. The soldiers searched homes, asking questions, turning over pots and blankets, checking papers. Rumors had already reached them. An alien was hiding here. The woman stood inside the inn's kitchen, her hands trembling as she kneaded dough. The sound of boots outside made her heart race. She looked through the small window and saw the soldiers questioning neighbors. Her silver eyes flickered with fear. Next door, the colonel watched everything. He stood at his fence, arms crossed, his face calm but his mind alert. He knew the soldiers' methods. They would not leave until they found something or someone. One soldier approached him. "Colonel," the man said with respect, giving a sharp nod. You've seen anyone unusual around here? The colonel's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the inn for the briefest moment. The soldier followed his gaze. What about the new woman? The soldier pressed. People say she's strange. Too tall, too quiet. She cooks, the colonel said flatly. The soldier narrowed his eyes. That all? That's all, the colonel replied, his voice hard enough to close the subject. The soldier hesitated, but no one questioned the colonel for long. He was a decorated veteran, a man who had once led troops into battles the younger soldiers only heard about in stories. His words still carried weight. For now, the soldiers moved on. But the colonel knew they would be back. That evening, the woman came to him. Her hands were tight around the edge of her shawl, her silver eyes wide with worry. They search for me, she whispered. Yes, the colonel said. They won't stop until they find what they came for. She swallowed hard. If they catch, they kill. The colonel did not answer at once. He looked at her, studying the fear written on her face. Fear, he realized, not of war, but of being alone, hunted, erased. Then don't give them a reason, he said finally. Keep your head low. Stay inside. No prayers to the stars. Her lips pressed together. She nodded slowly, but sorrow filled her gaze. The next day, the soldiers returned. This time, they went house to house, pushing open doors, searching even the smallest corners. The villagers whispered nervously. Some had begun to wonder aloud, was the woman really human, or had they welcomed danger into their midst? The innkeeper's wife defended her. She is kind. She works hard. But others muttered, kind or not, strange things happen when she's near. Food that heals, fires that light too quickly. Is that human? The tension thickened like a storm. Late that night, heavy boots stopped outside the woman's small room. She froze. A soldier's voice barked, "Open the door!" Her hands shook as she reached for the latch. But before she could move, the door opened from the outside, by the colonel. He stepped into the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. She works here, he said coldly. She's under my watch. The soldier frowned. Orders are clear. All outsiders must be checked. She's not a threat, the colonel said firmly. If she were, you wouldn't be standing here talking to me. The soldier hesitated. The weight of the colonel's reputation pressed heavy. Slowly, the man stepped back, though suspicion still burned in his eyes. After the soldiers left, the woman sank onto her chair, her breath trembling. Why? She whispered. Why you? Protect me? The colonel's face remained stern. Because I decide who's a danger here. Not them. But deep inside, he knew it was more complicated than that. Something in her sorrow, in the way she looked at the stars, reminded him of his own ghosts. He had fought too many wars to believe only in enemies and allies. Some were simply survivors, just like him. Still, he also knew the soldiers would not stop. They had seen his hesitation. They had noticed his silence. And silence to them meant secrets. That night, the colonel could not rest. He stood outside looking at the sky, the same sky she whispered to. He thought of the battles he had fought, the comrades he had lost, the choices that had haunted him. And now, another choice stood before him. Protect her and risk everything, or hand her over and end it quickly. The wind carried a faint sound from her room. She was whispering again, not to the stars this time, but to herself. Words of grief. Words of longing. Words he could not understand, but somehow felt. The colonel closed his eyes. For the first time in many years, he did not know which path was right, and yet he knew one thing clearly. Danger had arrived. And soon he would have to decide where his loyalty truly lay. With the soldiers he once led, or with the silver-eyed woman who had come seeking only a place to cook. The soldiers did not return the next morning, but their shadow still hung heavy over the border district. Conversations in the market grew sharper, whispers more dangerous. Some villagers began to keep their distance from the woman, crossing the street rather than passing near her. Others still defended her, speaking softly about her kindness, but fear was spreading. Fear, the colonel knew, was harder to fight than any army. The woman herself grew quieter. She no longer smiled when children asked for bread. She no longer lingered in the kitchen once the day's meals were served. Her eyes, always silver, now carried the weight of exhaustion. That night she came to the colonel's door. She stood outside, hands trembling as she knocked once softly. The colonel opened the door, surprised to see her there. For the first time she looked smaller, fragile, as if her strength had been stripped away. "They will not stop," she whispered. "No," the colonel said. "They won't." Her silver eyes lifted to his. "Then I must tell you." "Truth," the colonel stepped aside, letting her in. She sat at his table, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. For a long time, silence filled the room. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the corner. Finally, she spoke. "My world is gone," she said slowly, each word heavy. "Long ago, our leaders chose war. They fought against humans. They thought victory would bring honor, but it brought only fire. Planets burned. Families broken. I was a soldier's daughter. I saw everything fall." Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "When the war ended, there was nothing left. No home, no peace, only survivors scattered across stars. Many still fight, many still hate, but me," she pressed her hand to her chest. "I cannot fight anymore. I only want to live. To feed, to heal. That is why I came here." The colonel watched her closely. There was no pride in her words, no hidden arrogance. "Only sorrow. I cook," she continued, "because food is memory. Food is hope. When people eat, they feel safe. They share. They forget war for a while. That is all I wish to give." For a long moment, the colonel said nothing. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. But inside his thoughts stormed. He had fought her people once. He had seen their cruelty, their weapons, their fire. He had buried comrades because of them. And now one of their own sat at his table asking for nothing but a chance to cook. "Why here?" he asked finally, his voice steady. "Of all the places, why this border?" Her lips pressed tight. Then she whispered, "Because I heard stories of you. The colonel. A man who fought with honor. A man who did not kill for joy. I thought, maybe here I would be safe." The word struck him harder than any bullet. She had come not by chance, but by choice. She had sought him out. The colonel leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "If the soldiers learn who you are, they'll call you a spy. They'll drag you away. I won't be able to stop them forever." She looked at him, her voice breaking. "Then you must decide. If I am danger, give me to them. If I am not, then let me stay." Silence stretched. The colonel's chest tightened as old memories surfaced. His comrades falling, his enemies screaming, the endless noise of war. He had always believed humanity's duty was to fight, to protect, to never forgive. And yet here sat proof of something else. A survivor, a woman who carried sorrow instead of hate. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and endless. He thought of all the times he had looked at those same stars, searching for meaning after battles. And now he realized perhaps meaning was not in war, but in what survived after it. When he turned back, her silver eyes watched him with fear and hope mixed together. Finally, he spoke. "You are not my enemy," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of command. "Not anymore." Her lips parted, and for the first time a true smile touched her face, small, trembling but real. But the colonel's eyes stayed sharp. "The soldiers will return. The villagers will question more. If you stay, there will be danger. You must be ready." She nodded. "I am ready. For danger, for fear. But I cannot run again. Not anymore." The colonel sat across from her, his mind still torn, but his decision made. She had revealed her truth. Now the burden was his, to protect her, or to watch the soldiers take her away. One thing was certain. The days of quiet cooking and whispered prayers were over. The truth had changed everything. The sun burned red on the horizon when the soldiers came again. This time there was no warning, no polite questions. Trucks roared into the square, metal doors slammed, and boots thundered against the earth. The villagers gathered in frightened silence. At the front of the patrol stood an officer with hard eyes. He lifted a piece of paper and shouted, "By order of the Border Command, we know an alien hides among you. Harboring such a creature is treason. Step aside and hand her over." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some villagers looked down, afraid. Others looked toward the inn, where the silver-eyed woman stood frozen, her hands clenched against her apron. The colonel stepped from his house. His tall frame cut through the gathering. He walked slowly, calmly, as though the years of war had never left his bones. "She is no enemy," he said, his voice deep and steady. "She is a cook. She harms no one." The officer narrowed his eyes. "We've had reports of strange activity. Healing food, fires without sparks, nightly rituals. You think that is harmless? You of all people, Colonel, should know better. The Colonel's jaw tightened. He knew the truth in those words. He had seen aliens turn simple acts into weapons. But he also knew something else. This woman's sorrow, her wish for peace, her desire to feed instead of fight. She stays, he said firmly. The officer stepped closer. You would risk your district for her? The Colonel did not flinch. I would risk my name before I hand over someone who only wants to live. The officer's lip curled. He raised his hand and soldiers moved forward. Guns glinted under the setting sun. The villagers gasped. Some shouted in protest, others begged for calm. Fear twisted the square into chaos. The woman took a step forward, her silver eyes shining in the fire of the sunset. Enough, she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. I will go. If my presence brings danger, then better I leave than all suffer. But the Colonel's voice cut across hers like steel. No. He stood between her and the soldiers, his broad shoulders blocking their path. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his presence alone was a weapon. You will not take her, he said. The officer hesitated. The Colonel was no ordinary man. His record, his battles, his scars, all commanded respect even among the younger ranks. Why defend her? The officer demanded. She is not one of us. The Colonel's eyes burned. Because she is more human than you right now. She feeds the hungry. She heals the sick. She gives hope. That is humanity. If we destroy that, then we are worse than the enemies we fought. The square fell silent. The villagers, who had been torn between fear and loyalty, now looked at the woman differently. They remembered the meals that filled their bellies, the warmth that soothed their pain, the kindness in her hands. One by one, they began to step forward, forming a quiet wall behind the Colonel. She stays, an old woman said. She healed my son, a farmer added. She is no enemy, another whispered. The officer's face twisted with frustration. He looked from the villagers to the Colonel, his authority crumbling. He knew forcing this fight would mean more than arrest, it would mean rebellion. Finally, he lowered his hand. Very well, but if she causes trouble, the responsibility will be yours. The soldiers withdrew slowly, their boots striking the ground in frustration. The trucks roared away, leaving behind silence heavier than gunfire. The woman sank to her knees, her hands shaking. Her silver eyes filled with tears. She looked up at the Colonel. Why? Why you protect me when all could turn against you? The Colonel looked down at her, his face hard but his voice softer than it had been in years. Because war taught me one truth. Enemies are not decided by blood or by world. They are decided by choice. And you chose peace. For the first time since she had arrived, she smiled without fear. It was small, fragile, but it carried light stronger than any fire. That night the district was quiet again. The stars above burned bright, but the woman no longer prayed to them alone. She stood beside the Colonel, looking upward in silence. For the first time she felt not hunted, but safe. The Colonel's thoughts were heavy, but a strange warmth stirred in his chest. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons, not its armies, but its ability to protect even those who were once called enemies. And in that moment, under the endless sky, both human and alien found something rare in a border district scarred by fear: hope.